Hello, everybody. It's first thing in the morning, which is why my voice is down here. Yesterday, I sat down and I watched, because Mank was coming out, I watched Citizen Kane for the first time, and then I watched Mank. And that's what I'm gonna talk about today. How do I want to structure this? I'm deciding this now, for some reason. Citizen Kane was a movie I was very scared of because it's Citizen Kane. It's the movie of movies. There are only a couple of movies that are like the movie of movies that like every movie person has to have seen. Citizen Kane, The Godfather, 2001, Goodfellas? Jaws? So, this was scary to me because it was like, what if I don't like Citizen Kane? But I enjoy analyzing movies and breaking them down and saying like this works and this doesn't, and celebrating movies. And if I don't celebrate Citizen Kane, I feel like there's something wrong with me, you know? So I was very scared to watch it. Luckily, Citizen Kane is a really fucking good movie.
It isn't enough to tell us what a man did. You've got to tell us who he was.
And I really see why people like it as much as they do. It's not perfect, which was also really nice. It's just like a movie. Like any other movie, it's just a movie. It's the Citizen Kane of movies, but it's just a movie, ultimately. But it is really, really good, and I really loved it. It's not my favorite movie I've ever seen, and I don't think it's anybody's favorite movie, really. It's just the best movie. It's the best movie that could be made in 1941. Maybe. Maybe the things that it does wrong, maybe they could have been better. The fact that music just kind of awkwardly fades out when dialogue starts to happen. Or, terrible ADR, where you have Charles Foster Kane talking with sound, and then the sound disappears, but he keeps talking, and then he stops talking, but the sound comes in. Why wouldn't you just line up the sound to make... I feel like that's something that still could have been done in 1941. So little things like that pop up. The miniatures could have been built to look a little bit more big in scale. A couple things. If you're gonna have the shot that goes over a miniature building through the window into the diner or wherever it is, the bar, then actually make that shot happen instead of fading out and then showing the bar. Like you don't actually see what's inside the window. Little imperfections on what is ultimately a really solid character study of Charles Foster Kane, who is an allegory for William Randolph Hearst, a historical figure that I know very little about.
If I hadn't been very rich, I might have been a really great man.
It's really well done, and thematically, it is so smart. Basically, if you know anything about Citizen Kane, you probably know Rosebud. But he says Rosebud, and those are Charles Foster Kane's final words. And so the A plot is, in 1941, the newspapers want to figure out what Rosebud means so that they'll have a big story about Charles Foster Kane's final words and what they meant. So you get this guy who is kept in shadow for most of the movie. You don't really see his face. Talks to people from Charles Foster Kane's life. He goes to the guy who raised him. He goes to his business partner, his best friend, his first wife, his second wife, and tries to piece together what Rosebud is. Every time he talks to a person, you see Charles Foster Kane's life from the point that person met them until the point that person left his life. And so you get Charles Foster Kane's life told multiple times from multiple angles from different starting and ending points. But it's not just a flashback of this one scene. It's a flashback of his whole life. And what starts to happen is the mystery of Rosebud fades away as you get more invested in Charles Foster Kane as a person and seeing his rise and fall and worrying about what's going to happen to him, because you don't know that much about what's going to happen to him. You know he's going to die and he's going to say Rosebud. The movie starts right after the Rosebud thing with a film reel of his whole life. You know, he ran for office, and then he was caught in bed with a woman, and then he married that singer and built her an opera house. Okay, I know these things, but what the movie ends up being about is a man's life is not defined by a word or a moment or an action. It is defined by every word, every moment, every action that happens over the course of his life. That's the moral of Citizen Kane. Is they say it at the end of the movie. The guy who's interviewing everybody about Rosebud kind of has learned, and he says, a man's life is measured by more than one word, you know. And Rosebud, what Rosebud is meaningless. Ultimately, what matters is Charles Foster Kane lived his life and rose and fell and had a set of certain ideals that kind of withered away, but he was very principled still, and he was all these complicated things that every person really is. That's what really is resonant about Citizen Kane. I think that's why, ultimately, I think that's why it stands the test of time, because the best movie can't just be a movie that's really solidly made and tightly done. I love Teen Wolf, and it's one of my favorite movies with Michael J. Fox. But it's not very daring. It just is really good at being what it is, which is a coming-of-age movie about a kid who turns into a werewolf. It's a fun premise. It's a good movie. It's really well done. I enjoy watching it. But it's not going to challenge anybody. It's not going to really make you feel. It's not really going to anything. Citizen Kane is daring. And it's just as tight as Teen Wolf from a writing perspective. It's really well shot. I love, they do a lot of good composition. Like I said, with the shadows. It's all in black and white. And with like the guy hidden in shadow and different people hidden in shadow throughout it. And, like the scene where he, where Charles Foster Kane trashes the room, and then you kind of look out, and it's not a Dutch angle, it's not, but what he's looking at is all of a sudden all these people are around watching him, and you didn't see them show up, you didn't see them, you know, go, oh, this is really weird, you know, he just looks out, and it's just this corridor, or this, like, maybe it's like a larger room, but it's just walls of people looking right at the camera. I also want to mention that Orson Welles is fantastic as Charles Foster Kane. He's amazing. There's a scene early on where he's telling his legal guardian. His legal guardian is like, you're going to grow up to be, like, rich, and you're going to do a thing. And he sends out a letter, and he gets a letter back that says, I don't like any of the things you suggested that I do, except for that newspaper company that you said you were going to close. Don't close it. I think it would be fun to run a newspaper.
Trouble is, you don't realize you're talking to two people. As Charles Foster Kane, who owns 82,364 shares of public transit preferred, you see, I do have a general idea of my holdings. I sympathize with you. Charles Foster Kane is a scoundrel. His paper should be run out of town. A committee should be formed to boycott him. You may, if you can form such a committee, put me down for a contribution of $1,000.
My time's
On the other hand, I am the publisher of the Inquirer. As such, it's my duty, and I'll let you in on a little secret. It's also my pleasure to see to it that decent, hard-working people in this community aren't robbed blind by a pack of money-mad pirates just because Haven't anybody to look after their interests.
The makeup in Citizen Kane is, like, really, really good. Because, obviously, Charles Foster Kane goes from however old he is at the start to his death, and he, gets a mustache, and he gets all this, he ages up, and loses hair and things. I think that's everything I have to say. This isn't going to blow anybody's mind, I don't think, but I would recommend Citizen Kane. I think it's very, very, very good. It was very rewarding to watch. I would encourage people to watch it. I give Citizen Kane a 9 out of 10. All right. Now on to Mank.
Mank, it's Orson Welles.
Of course it is.
I think it's time we talked.
What is it the writer says? Tell the story you know.
And I watched it after Citizen Kane, which was a huge mistake because I thought, like, okay, Mank is coming out. I'm interested in it. It looks neat. I gotta know what the deal is. What I didn't think of was that doing so would encourage a direct comparison between Mank and the Citizen Kane of movies. Like, the movie that is the movie. Like, it's the greatest movie that's ever been made. And this movie is asking for a direct comparison. It's structured similarly. It's filmed in black and white. It's about a similar thing. It's all of the things. It's literally about Citizen Kane. All of the things that it could do to ask you to compare it to Citizen Kane, it's doing. And that is, I think, hugely to the movie's detriment. As I was watching the movie and afterwards, I came up with basically 3 movies that they could have made instead of Mank that are about Herman Mankiewicz writing Citizen Kane. There are 3 movies. 1, he wants the rights to Citizen Kane. I thought it was going to be about the guy who wrote Citizen Kane getting gypped by Orson Welles out of credit for writing this movie because it's thought of as the Orson Welles movie. And that would have had stakes. It would have been really interesting. It would have been like, okay, how did he do it? It's like 2 throwaway lines and then a big explosion at the end. A little over halfway through this 2-hour and 15-minute movie, which felt like twice that length, by the way, Herman Mankiewicz has written the script, and this guy comes to, like, tell him about it, and he says, hey, man, you should ask for credit. And he's like, what? That idea has never occurred to me, and we're now, an hour and 45 minutes into this film. I've never thought about doing that. Maybe I should, but I don't think so. Like, 4 scenes go by, and then Orson Welles is there, and he says, I would like credit for the movie. And Orson Welles explodes. And then Herman Mankiewicz wins the Oscar and goes, I would like to accept this award the same way the script was written in the absence of Orson Welles. And you're like, is that the point of the movie? Because that wasn't brought up until an hour and 45 minutes into the movie. The stakes of the A-plot are, will Citizen Kane be well received? Will people like it? Which aren't very high stakes if you live on Earth. If you're watching Mank, odds are you know what Citizen Kane is, at least vaguely, which means the entire, like, all the stakes are like, is Citizen Kane gonna be any good? Will it be, they're like, it meanders all over the place, and it's poorly structured, and it's too long, and it's, all these things, and it's like, well, it's Citizen Kane. It's Citizen Kane, and it's gonna be great. So there's no, I'm not afraid of this.
Ready and willing to hunt the great white whale?
Just call me Ahab. Do come in.
At this rate, you will never finish.
You said 90 days. Well, said 60. I'm doing the best I can.
The structure is very similar to Citizen Kane. There's the contemporary A-plot, and then you get a bunch of flashbacks. Except the flashbacks are not very clear as to when they're taking place, so I was like, is this before the last one, or is it after, or is this, did he just where are we here? It gets into a lot of political stuff. They're against Upton Sinclair, who Mank is for, and Mank promotes socialism because socialism is sharing the wealth and versus communism, which is sharing the poverty, which he explicitly says. So he's pro-socialism, which means he's pro-Upton Sinclair, but then Upton Sinclair is angry at William Randolph Hearst because he says he will lead a socialist revolution. So which one of them is socialist? And also, if William Randolph Hearst is running for office, as it says in the movie, why is the name of the guy that they're announcing at that election not William Randolph Hearst? Why is it it's like Frank something? Why is that the case? It was really hard to follow. It was kind of like watching Tenet, where they're explaining things, but nothing really actually gets communicated because it's just jargon that you don't understand because it hasn't been explained to you. So all of that political stuff just gets completely fumbled unless you already know about it outside of the movie. This movie was so frustrating because it's really competent, but at the same time it's it doesn't communicate anything. It's all for nothing. It's not like Vivarium, where the moral is so stupid that it doesn't communicate anything of value. This movie just doesn't communicate anything. Mank communicates nothing, which was really frustrating to watch because it's oh, this is well shot, and it's it's well acted, and there's emotion behind what's going on, and one scene leads into the next, but ultimately I'm not really getting anything. It kind of dances around points the whole way. Is it going to be about politics? Is it going to be about alcoholism? Is it going to be about cheating on your wife? Is it going to be about his connection with William Randolph Hearst? The best movie this could have been is a one-to-one kind of parallel of Citizen Kane, but more directly about Mank and William Randolph Hearst as they go through their lives. And then at the end of the movie, Mank goes, I would like to write this movie called Citizen Kane. It's about basically William Randolph. He describes William Randolph Hearst, and you're like, wow, that's Citizen Kane. Got it. But that's not what happens. And the third idea that I came up with was, what was my third idea? Hold on. The third idea that I came up with for what this movie could have been about is basically I got very late in the movie and I realized, and this is how I knew that other idea where Citizen Kane fans can point out the one-to-one comparison would have been a really neat idea for a movie, because they're like, oh, this guy is basically Bernstein, and you're like, yes, that's Bernstein, and they go, oh my gosh, this guy is William Randolph Hearst, and this girl is Amanda Seyfried, and who's great in the movie. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, Seyfried. She's the best performance in it. She's a lot more subtle, and she acts the role more intelligently than Gary Oldman does. He's very blatant about everything, and he's fine. He says the lines as they should be said, but there's just nothing electrifying about it. There's nothing particular about it. It's just kind of yeah, he's communicating the text with emotion behind it. That's it. But she makes a lot of really subtle decisions that inform the character in a really special way, and turn what is ultimately just another supporting role into basically the lead of the movie, or the co-lead.
Hello, everyone.
Make yourself to home, Mr. Mankiewicz, or shall I call you Herman?
Please, call me Mank. Mank. Mank.
Mank.
Mank.
This is Herman Mankiewicz, but we're to call him Mank.
Mankiewicz. Herman Mankiewicz.
I kind of realized on my own, after a whole movie of being told, okay, this is the one-to-one comparison, I was like, oh shit, Mank is the Charles Foster Kane best friend, who is a writer, who's on Charles Foster Kane's payroll, who develops an alcohol problem, and they have a falling out. All of that happened with Mank and William Randolph Hearst, and I was like, oh, that's a connection. But then the connection that is meaningful to the characters and impacts everything is never brought up. They never say and what about this role that was written about an alcoholic guy who has a falling out with him, and he gets kept around because William Randolph Hearst likes what he has to say more than what he, what he writes, and more because of, he's his friend. What about that role? Does that have anything to do with you? And you never get like that, like exploring his psyche. They never even bring up that role exists in the movie. And it's like one of the biggest roles in Citizen Kane. Like, it's like one of the most important characters. And it's so clearly, like, once you watch Mank, it's so clearly the Mank self-insert, but it's never brought up in Mank, which feels so strange, because it's like, why wouldn't you? So a better movie would have been about him trying to write Citizen Kane, and not really being sure exactly what he needs to do to, like, they're like, there's just something off about the movie, there's something missing, and you're like, well, what's the piece that's missing? They're like, he has this legal guardian, and he has this, and I know he's supposed to be lonely, but does he really have no friends? And he like tries to figure out a friend character, and blah 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 blah, and he eventually has to like come to terms with himself being fitting into this movie. Maybe that could have been part of the William Randolph Hearst movie, where it's about their relationship as they grow, and then it inspires the movie or something. All of these ideas would have made for a far more interesting... I explained what Mank was about to one of my friends, and immediately he went, oh, that sounds really boring. And I was like, it was. It felt like 4 hours long, and it was 15 minutes longer than Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane flew by, because it's Citizen Kane. But this movie felt so fucking long, because nothing of substance was going on for the majority of it. It was, is Citizen Kane gonna turn out good? Who knows? With flashbacks that didn't really relate to what's going on, except for saying, this is what Citizen Kane was based on. It's a very structurally just kind of broken movie, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't have anything to it. And it was so frustrating to watch, because I was just like, oh, I wish I liked this. Like, I was excited for Mank. I say that about all the movies and games that I review, pretty much, except for, like, Miles Morales, which I played out of obligation. But if you go onto my Instagram, a lot of the movies that I review, I go, I was really excited for this movie. Because I don't watch movies that I'm not excited about, unless they're superhero movies. Those are the only ones that I have, like, brand loyalty to. I go into movies with a positive outlook, because then you have to look for things to dislike. As opposed to saying, if you go into a movie to dislike it, then you're gonna nitpick every single thing. It's like how when you don't like a person, and all of a sudden everything they do starts to grate on you. You go into a movie hoping to hate it, all the little imperfections start to make you angry. And to me, I love movies, and I want to celebrate movies. So there's no reason for me to go into a movie to dislike it, to not have a good time with the movie. I want to like every movie I see, and I just didn't like Mank. And I wanted to, so bad. Because especially after watching Citizen Kane, it's like, that material could have been so interesting. What went into making the Citizen Kane of movies? The phrase that people use to describe the best thing of any type of thing is the Citizen Kane of blank. The phrase that people use to describe, a movie that's really good but isn't the best movie you've ever seen is, it's not Citizen Kane. What went into making that? With a personality like Orson Welles behind it, with a personality like Herman Mankiewicz behind it, with such blatant allegories for William Randolph Hearst, who was a person with immense power. What went into making that? And ultimately, the movie kind of dances around the idea of making a movie about that. But it never settles into one thing that it tries to accomplish. It's frustrating. It's one of the better movies I've seen this year, but it's not better than Sonic the Hedgehog. And when you have like an Oscar bait movie coming out, it's like, about the greatest movie ever made and stars Gary Oldman, is directed by David Fincher. It should be better than Sonic the Hedgehog. Theoretically, Sonic the Hedgehog is better than it had any right to be. to be fair. But it's not amazing. It's just pretty good. And Mank is not pretty good. And that's really disappointing.
You cannot capture a man's entire life in 2 hours. All you can hope is to leave the impression of one.
Why Hurst? Outside his own blonde Betty Boop, you're always his favorite dinner partner.
Are you familiar with the parable of the organ grinder's monkey?
Thank you for watching. Go ahead and click like, give me a comment, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next video. Subscribe